So I get asked about that quote all the time. What does it mean? Sometimes people can't read it. They see it behind me during my live streams and want to know what's the deal with that quote. That is a quote from Gorgeous George. Gorgeous George was a wrestler in the 1940s and 50s. What is going on, everyone? So I get asked all the time about that quote that I have in that poster right there. That is a quote from Gorgeous George. If you do not know who Gorgeous George is, you can thank him if you enjoyed Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, Jake the Snake. All those guys owe their careers to this man. Wrestling was a lot different in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s. And it's somewhere around the 1950s, this guy shows up, and he was a normal man, a wrestler, and he decided that he would add a little entertainment to the wrestling. And he developed a character called Gorgeous George. He had long, curly, flowing hair, and he came into the ring wearing like long robes of pink and white. Basically, he played a very flamboyant gay man, is what the character he was portraying as. Now think, 1950s, 1940s, that was not acceptable. These days, you feel offended because the guy was doing it, but at the time, this was basically offensive to the crowd, and the crowd hated him. Thing was, George was not anything like that. He was a married man, had kids, all that stuff. This was just a character he played to get the audience riled up. Because George figured out something very, very early on, and that's that quote. A lot of people will pay to see someone shut your mouth. Basically, he was saying, if they don't like you, more people will show up to see you lose than more people would show up to see you win if they liked you. He gave that quote, or told that to a young Cassius Clay. Right before he became Muhammad Ali, before he became a big star, he was doing a wrestling match, and the story goes that Muhammad Ali, at the time Cassius Clay, got back to the dressing room to talk to him after or before his match. And that's what he told him. A lot of people will pay a lot of money to see someone shut your mouth. Muhammad Ali took that advice to heart and became Muhammad Ali. He was obnoxious, he was irritating, he was extremely talented, probably the best boxer we've ever seen, but he annoyed so many people, they wanted him to lose. And that's why so many people loved watching Muhammad Ali. He sold more tickets and put more asses in the seats, as they call it, because they hated him. At the time Muhammad Ali was fighting, we're talking 1960s, 1970s, race relations weren't the best here in the United States, and here we have an obnoxious African-American man, and this just drove everyone crazy. So he basically took what Gorgeous George gave him and ran with it. Sadly, Gorgeous George died in 1963, but he is what made the wrestling that you may see today what it is. Characters, it's staged, all that good stuff is because of Gorgeous George. So I love that quote. It's not just for athletes either. You take Howard Stern. Howard Stern does his own little thing of it. Back in the day, I should say, when Howard Stern was very controversial. He wanted people to hate him so they'd tune in. They didn't like him, but they tuned in to see what he would say next, and they could get worked up. Madonna, little outrageous, get people to dislike her. Some people loved her, some people hated her. Either way, she made money off it. There's been a lot of other people, Dennis Rodman, the list goes on. They basically took their own version of this quote and made a career out of it. So that's why I've always had it up there. And in the beginning, when I first started my YouTube channel, I kind of did that. I mispronounce like little parts of cities or something like that to get the locals irritated. But what I've noticed, the reason I bring this up today, the world's changing. And I've kind of noticed that people aren't getting into that anymore. They want a happier vibe to the videos. And that's what I've kind of been transitioning into. It's really weird, because even when I was a stand-up comedian, I said things to get people to have the shock. If they got the shock and the laughter, that was a well-played joke for me. That's how I wanted it. But as I got towards the end of wanting to do stand-up, but the crowd has started changing. They didn't want to be shocked anymore. They didn't want to hear insults about anyone anymore. They wanted to have happy, observational jokes. That wasn't my thing. It's one reason I quit doing stand-up comedy. My sense of humor wasn't selling as much anymore. Not like I was some big successful comic or anything like that. I was, barely making it on the financial situation with it. And yeah, it was all because of that quote. That I read that quote probably 1982. And I thought it was ingenious that that's how human beings work. If they hate you, they'll actually pay more to see you lose than they will if they love you and they want to see your skills. It's a strange world we live in. See you tomorrow.